There's a silver crossover in your neighbor's driveway that's identical to yours. Same trim, same color, same week off the same lot. 9 years later, her driveway is empty, and yours still has the car sitting in it with the title in a kitchen drawer underneath a pile of takeout menus. Here's the part that should bother you. She had the lower payment, not by a little, by about $130 a month, every month for 9 straight years. She won that negotiation, and she won it 108 times in a row, and it cost her roughly $32,000. Neither of you did anything reckless. Nobody bought a Lamborghini. Nobody got fleeced at some lot with an inflatable tube man flailing around out front. You both walked into an ordinary dealership, sat in the same ordinary chair, and picked whichever option the finance manager said made more sense. That's the whole problem. My name is Nick, and I've spent an unreasonable portion of my adult life reading lease contracts that were specifically engineered so nobody would read them. If you're facing a car decision this year and the numbers won't make sense no matter how you rearrange them, hit subscribe and drop a like. Because today we're running the real math on buying versus leasing in 2026, including the one situation where leasing genuinely, mathematically wins, which almost nobody will tell you about honestly. Let's start with what actually changed, because most of what you've heard about this decision is running on data from a completely different economy. The average new vehicle in America now sells for $49,855. Not the luxury segment, the average. Tariffs added about 10.4% of that over the past year and have no expiration date. So whatever you were mentally budgeting 2 years ago, add 10% and try not to flinch. The average new car loan payment is $770 a month. The average lease payment is $619, and 1 in 5 buyers is signing for over $1,000. And before you assume everyone's handling it fine, they aren't. 30.9% of trade-ins this year came in underwater. The average person owing $7,183 more than the car was worth. Repossessions hit about 1.73 million in 2024, the most since 2009. That's 1 in 3 people walking in to trade a car and discovering they own a negative number. But none of that changed the answer to buy versus lease. All of it just changed the price of getting the answer wrong. Hold on to 2 people for the rest of this, because every blanket rule you've heard about leasing gets one of them badly wrong. Cyrus runs a small contracting business and wants an electric SUV. Lorraine drives 18,000 miles a year because her territory covers 3 counties. But first you need to see how your decision actually gets made, not on a spreadsheet. In the chair. You've been in that room. Small office off the showroom, a desk, a monitor turned slightly away from you, and a stack of paperwork that somehow reproduces while you sit there. At some point, the person across the desk slides over a sheet with 4 boxes on it. Trade-in value, purchase price, down payment, monthly payment. That's the 4 square, and it's the most quietly effective piece of design in American retail. Because watch what they ask you. They ask about box 4. Only box 4. What are you comfortable paying every month? And you answer, because it's a reasonable question and you're a reasonable person. You say 500, maybe 550. Congratulations, you've just handed over the only number that matters and removed yourself from every other negotiation on that page, because now the other 3 boxes are variables they get to solve for. Loan too expensive at your number? Stretch it to 84 months. Still too expensive? Here's a lease, same car, same payment, and you can take it home tonight. Nobody lied to you. Every number on that sheet is accurate. You just got asked the wrong question so smoothly it felt like customer service. Cyrus got asked box 4, Lorraine got asked box 4, and nearly 1 in 4 new car loans now runs 84 months or longer, which is a 7-year loan on a machine that starts falling apart around year 8. That's box 4 doing its job. So let's do the thing they'd rather you didn't and take apart what a lease payment actually is, because almost nobody knows, and the confusion is load-bearing. When you finance a car, you borrow the whole price and pay it back. Boring, everybody gets it. When you lease, you're not borrowing the whole price. You're borrowing the part of the car you're going to use up. Here's how the sausage gets made. Say your car sticker's at 40,000 and you talk them down to 38. The leasing company looks up the residual, which is their prediction of what it's worth in 36 months. Call it 60%, so 24,000. Now subtract. $14,000 of value is going to evaporate while that car sits in your driveway. Divide by 36 months. $389. That's your lease payment. You're paying cash monthly for the exact quantity of value the car loses while you own the privilege of washing it. Then they add the rent charge, which is interest in a fake mustache. You'll see it quoted as a money factor, a decimal like 0.0025. And it looks harmless because it's tiny and sounds like a setting on a microwave. Multiply it by 2,400 and you've got your actual interest rate. 6%, never harmless, just in costume. And here's what isn't on the window sticker. Your dealer can mark that money factor up above whatever rate the bank gave them and pocket the spread. You can shop a loan rate at 3 banks before lunch. On a lease, you probably didn't know there was a rate in there to shop. So add it up. You're paying the depreciation plus interest on both the full price and the residual, plus an acquisition fee plus tax. What you're buying isn't a car, it's the steepest, most expensive 3 years of one. And then you hand back the cheap part like you're returning a library book. Because depreciation isn't a straight line. Your car drops 15 to 20% in the first 12 months alone, and by year 5, the average is 41.8% gone. Years 1 through 3 are a cliff, years 6 through 12 are a gentle downhill stroll. Leasing signs you up for the cliff, on subscription, forever, and you never once get the stroll. Which brings me to the word in this title doing the most work, and it's the one in quotation marks. None of this is new. Leasing has always been buying the cliff, and that hasn't changed since your parents got talked into it. What's new is that the cliff got 10.4% taller from tariffs, climbing it now costs you 6.4% instead of 3%, and in September of 2025, the one legitimate reason to lease died in a single bill. Same trap, repriced. Right now, let's go back to those 2 driveways because it's time to actually run this. We'll call your neighbor Odette. She's 34, she's a dental hygienist, and she has never once been late on anything in her life. And we'll call you Barrett because you need a name if you're going into a spreadsheet. You both want the same crossover. Stickers at 40,000, negotiates to 38. You buy. You put 5,800 down, which is right around the national average and is probably about what's in your savings account that you're willing to part with. You finance 32,200 at 6.4% over 60 months. Your payment is $629. Over 5 years, you pay $37,716, of which about $5,500 is pure interest, which is the fee you pay for not having $38,000 lying around. Add the down payment. You've spent $43,516. Then month 61 arrives, and something happens to you that never happens to Odette. Nothing. Nothing comes out. There's no email, no autopay, no $629 leaving on the 4th. You keep driving the same car to the same job, and the money just stays. Odette's beating you, though, for now. She put $2,500 down and her payment's $501, so she's up $128 a month on you, and she has a nicer infotainment screen. 36 months later, she hands the keys back, pays a disposition fee, puts down another $2,500, and signs for the newer version of the same car. Except that car costs more now, because everything does and residuals didn't move to save her. Lease 2 runs about $560. 3 years later, lease 3 runs about $625. Her payment climbed 25%, while yours went to 0, and she never once had a conversation about it, because it never arrived as a bill, it arrived as a new car smell. Total her up. 9 years of payments, $60,696, 3 separate down payments, $7,500, disposition fees, call it $800, and I'm being generous assuming one got waived. Odette's 9-year total is about $69,000, yours is $43,516, That's a cash difference of roughly $25,500. And you still have the car. 9 years old, higher mileage, a coffee stain on the passenger seat with real history to it, and it's worth around $10,500. Odette has a folder. So the raw gap is about $36,000. Now, let me be fair, because if I'm not, this whole exercise is worthless. Odette drove 3 cars that were never older than 3 years, under factory warranty the entire time. She never bought tires at year 7, never got the call about a water pump, never sat in a waiting room with a vending machine and a television bolted to the ceiling playing a home renovation show. You did. Call it $4,000 in repairs she genuinely dodged. Subtract it. You're still ahead by about $32,000. Sit with how that happened, because nobody made a mistake. Odette never bought a car she couldn't afford and never missed a payment. She just answered box 4 honestly, 108 times. And if you put that $32,000 in a broad index fund and leave it alone for 20 years at 7%, it's roughly $124,000. That's not a car. That's the difference between retiring when you decide to and retiring when your knees decide for you. Your money didn't sit there. It compounded quietly while she was signing lease number 4. Tell me in the comments if you've ever run your buyout number at the end of a lease and been genuinely surprised by what you found, because those stories teach better than my spreadsheets do. And hang on for Cyrus, because he's about to be the one person here who should sign. Oh, and all of that assumes she never drove a single mile over. The average lease gets turned in with about 36,954 miles on a 36,000 mile limit, which means if you're average, you're already over before you park. Which is where Lorraine comes in and where this stops being funny. Remember, she covers 3 counties. 18,000 miles a year. She took the 12,000 mile allowance because it had the payment she liked, and because in a room with no windows, an extra 6,000 miles a year sounds like a rounding error. You'd have done the same thing. Over 3 years, she drives 54,000 against a limit of 36,000. 18,000 miles over at 25 cents each is a $4,500 invoice handed to her the day she turns it in. Not financed, not spread out. That day at a counter holding a pen someone else handed her. So if you drive more than about 13,000 miles a year, a lease isn't a financial product for you. It's a speeding ticket with a 3-year delay. But I promised you the case where leasing genuinely wins, and I meant it. Leasing isn't a scam. It's a tool that's been sold to the wrong people for 40 years. Here's who it's actually for, and it starts with electric vehicles. If you shopped an EV before last fall, you were shopping inside a loophole. The Commercial Clean Vehicle Credit let leasing companies claim $7,500 per car as the title holder, so they skipped the income caps, the price caps, and the assembly rules, then handed you that money as a discount. Any EV, any income, anybody, that ended September 30th, 2025. New credit, used credit, loophole, gone in one bill. If you were waiting for the right moment, you missed it by about a month. Electric vehicles were 11.3% of new car sales that September, an all-time record. By October, 5.9. By November, 5.1. The market halved in 60 days, which is roughly the reaction you'd expect if someone unplugged it. But here's why you might still want to lease one. Electric vehicles lose 57.2% of their value over 5 years against an all-vehicle average of 41.8, and it isn't because they're bad cars. Battery tech improves every 18 months, which makes a 3-year-old EV feel like a phone with a physical keyboard. Charging standards keep moving underneath everybody. Nobody's agreed on how to prove a used battery's health to a stranger. So look at what you're actually signing. A lease is a contract where somebody else agrees to eat the depreciation. On a category shedding 57%, that's not a trap. That's the whole reason the instrument exists, which is Cyrus and why he's the one person here who should sign. He won't buy that electric SUV because he'd rather not own an asset with a 57% decay rate bolted to the floor. So he does the thing you shouldn't. He leases. And because manufacturers are self-funding incentives to replace the dead credit, Honda putting 7,500 on the hood, Hyundai and Kia going as high as 10,000, he claws back most of what the government stopped paying. Then he deducts the business use portion because he actually uses it for work. Fast depreciating asset, a manufacturer paying him to take it, and a real deduction. That's the honest case for leasing, and notice how little it has in common with yours, which was that box 4 looked friendlier. Now let me tell you what your version feels like, because this isn't a spreadsheet problem. A permanent car payment doesn't feel like a crisis. That's what makes it work. It feels like a utility bill. It clears, you barely notice, life continues. You're not lying awake at 2 in the morning over $600. You're lying awake at 2 in the morning 11 years later, wondering why you've been employed continuously since you were 24 and don't own one single thing outright. Odette never had a bad month. Not one. That's the whole horror of it. Nothing ever became visibly unaffordable. Nothing bounced. And there was never a single moment where a sensible person would have stopped and reconsidered. You'd have done exactly what she did. The damage got spread so evenly across 9 years that it never once registered as damage. It feels like a text from a dealership saying your lease matures in 90 days and would you like to come see what's new? And you were never going to say no, because the alternative is not having a car. If you're the kind of person who watches this and starts wondering how to build something that generates income instead of quietly consuming it, I run a school community where we walk through starting a faceless YouTube channel from zero. Links below. I'd rather you build an asset than lease one. Because here's the systemic piece, and it isn't really about leasing. The industry doesn't sell you cars, it sells you monthly payments, and every mechanism invented in the last 15 years exists to make a big number look small by stretching it sideways. Subprime 60-day delinquencies hit 6.9% in January, the highest in a series going back to 1994, higher than the financial crisis. And nobody in that room is your enemy, exactly. Your finance manager is paid on products sold. The dealer is paid on volume. The manufacturer needs that unit gone this quarter. Not one person in that building earns $1 when you say no thanks and drive your current car another 3 years. That isn't a conspiracy. It's an incentive structure, and it explains the Foursquare better than Malice ever could. Now let me handle the objections, because I can hear 3 of them. First, leases include maintenance. Mostly they don't. A few brands cover limited scheduled service, and anything genuinely expensive in those years was under factory warranty anyway, whether you leased or bought. You're being sold coverage you already had. Second, one-pay leases and advertised specials beat this math. The one-pay genuinely is better since the money factor applies to less money. But you're handing over every dollar up front to build zero equity, and if it gets totaled in month 4, you'll learn a lot about how gap insurance treats prepaid cash. The specials are usually a loss leader trim in a color nobody ordered, with $4,000 due at signing hiding in the fine print. Third, buying used means buying someone else's problems. Sometimes, but the depreciation cliff already happened to someone else, which is the point. The catch is that used loans average 11.4% instead of 6.4%. So your win is smaller than the internet promised. It's still a win. So here's your actual decision rule, and it isn't buy or lease. It's how many payment-free years you're willing to give up. That's the whole thing. You didn't beat Odette because buying is morally superior. You beat her because you bought 48 months of 0 and she bought 48 months of 560. The contract was almost incidental, which means Cyrus, with his depreciating EV and his business deduction, should absolutely lease. Lorraine, with her 3 counties, should never lease again as long as she lives. And if you're honestly going to trade cars every 3 years no matter what I say, leasing may cost you less than buying and eating that cliff yourself. Be honest about which one you are. But the average vehicle on American roads is now 12.8 years old, so statistically, you're a keeper who's been sold a renter's product. 2 practical things. If you're in a lease right now on a gas or hybrid, run your buyout number before you hand the keys back, because buyout equity has been averaging around $5,500. Since your residual got set 3 years ago and the used market moved without asking permission. If it's an EV, the reverse is usually true and you should return it. And shop your money factor. Ask for the buy rate. If your finance manager suddenly needs to go check with his manager, you've got your answer. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. It's just what happens when you do arithmetic instead of box 4. Look, nobody's going to congratulate you for this. There's no ceremony when a car loan ends, no confetti in the driveway, no certificate, no guy from the bank shaking your hand. It's a Tuesday, your payment doesn't come out, and then the next month it doesn't come out again. That's what you actually bought, not a crossover. 4 years of a bill that never arrived. And that's the thing about your neighbor's empty driveway. It was never empty because anything went wrong. It's empty because everything went exactly the way the paperwork said it would.